Welcome to Uninvited, the show where we cover news that matters to Ontario women. On this program, we're talking about the current Ontario Autism Plan that's in dire need of an upgrade. Ontario families in the autism community are often faced with the choice between putting food on the table or securing the much-needed therapy their children need. But first, here are some recent headlines. Immigration is a hot topic this month in the wake of Premier Ford's comments about newcomers, suggesting they're coming to Ontario to sit around and collect money. Critics said the Premier's comments were offensive and they feed into negative stereotypes about newcomers, ignoring the fact that the vast majority of immigrants that come to Canada, they're skilled workers who either have a job lined up or they have to show that they're able to support themselves, and welfare simply isn't an option. Jennifer Robson, who's a professor in public policy at Carleton University, said this: "Even if he didn't mean to sound racist, the fact of the matter is that he was echoing things and amplifying a story that has been quite deliberately used by people with biases against non-whites in our communities. It is especially disappointing at a time when immigrants or new Canadians have been among those that have suffered the most during the pandemic, working jobs that have put them at higher risk of contracting COVID." As for Premier Ford, he doesn't think he needs to apologize for his comments, instead doubling down on them, saying that he's pro-immigration, and all you have to do is look at the people who go to his annual party, Ford Fest. Last month, the provincial government also announced it would replace Ontario's Long-Term Care Homes Act. While there is strong support for ending for-profit care delivery, this proposed legislation does not suggest removing for-profit business structures from Ontario's broken system. The legislation also does not address the abysmal working conditions for employees, most of which are women, and details on wages and full-time employment are nowhere to be found. In fact, families in need will have to wait until 2025 for the promised 4 hours of care to come into effect. Too late for too many seniors. And with over 84% of the province's eligible population fully vaccinated, Ontario plans to lift all remaining public health measures by March 2022. And here's what we can expect. In January, we'll see capacity limits lifted in places where proof of vaccination is not required. Proof of vaccine requirements may also be lifted at restaurants, bars, and sports facilities. And then in February, the plan is to lift proof of vaccine requirements in high-risk settings, followed by March, where Ontario plans to lift mask-wearing requirements in all indoor public spaces, as well as all remaining proof of vaccine requirements. One crucial public setting that was not addressed in this plan was classrooms, with Ford saying all decisions will be informed by the key indicators, as well as advice from the Chief Medical Officer of Health. Some have applauded the province's cautious approach to reopening. There are some that have raised flags. The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario said the plan puts our progress at risk, especially since some restrictions will be easing as winter and flu season approaches. Our program today will focus on the Ontario Autism Plan. Since the provincial government took over the plan in 2018, many much-needed services have come to a grinding halt. Wait lists to access support for funding have more than doubled, and the situation for parents with autistic children is quickly becoming dire, with some paying tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket every year to get their kids the care and therapy they need. One Ontario mother, Stacey Kennedy, they've been on the wait list for 4 years to access programs for her 10-year-old autistic son. At a breaking point earlier this year, Stacey staged a week-long sit-in outside the Premier's office just to get some answers about the lack of funding and access to services her son so desperately needs. And Stacey is not alone. Advocates estimate more than 40,000 families are waiting to receive funding and therapy services. Early intervention is key for the kids who display signs of autism, and every year that passes with families in waitlist limbo without professional help, it greatly reduces an autistic child's chance to live a full and independent life. Now, the biggest challenge here in Ontario is that the primary treatment for autism, it's called applied behavior analysis, is delivered under family and community services as opposed to public healthcare services. So that means the cost of ABA therapy, which can be upwards of $100,000 a year, that is completely out of pocket when there is not a sufficient provincial government plan in place. Parents like Stacey are expected to make a choice between putting food on the table or providing the daily care her high-needs son requires. I'm joined today by Angela Brandt, who's the president of Ontario Autism Coalition. Angela's son was diagnosed with autism at an early age, and that journey quickly led her into a leading advocacy role. The OAC's mission is to ensure that publicly funded services for individuals with autism and their families are accessible, ethical, evidence-based, and comprehensive. Angela, thank you so much for joining us here. I wonder if you could just start off by telling us a bit about yourself and how you became an autism advocate.
Yes, thank you for having me. I am the current president of the Ontario Autism Coalition. We fight for services for children with autism. I have a 16-year-old who has high needs autism. He was diagnosed just before he was 2 years old. And I noticed how tough it was advocating for his needs. And it was such a struggle for me to be able to provide for him. I realized that there are many parents out there that couldn't advocate for their children themselves. I think it's very important over time to give back because so many other advocates helped me in the early days.
And for people who aren't too familiar with the autism file and some of the challenges, maybe you can just give us a lay of the land. What's it like right now for parents who have autistic children? What are they dealing with? What do they have to navigate?
Right now, we are in a very dire situation. The current government, the progressive conservative government, back in March of 2019, they destroyed the Ontario Autism Program. This government came in, just bulldozed it, and destroyed a needs-based program. And right now, families with children with autism are in crisis because they can't access the support that their children need. They did not consult with parents of autistic children. And that's been the modus operandi for this current government. They do not listen to their stakeholders, and that has been a very big issue. The previous program, you could apply for what your child needs. And every child is different. That's why they call it a spectrum. It's autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And some children have lower needs and some children have higher needs. And so the previous program, if your child had higher needs, you would get extra support. This government came in and said, oh no, that's not going to work. We're going to just make it a subsidy program, and we're going to give children over the age of $5,000, and children under 5 and under, $20,000, regardless of need. And the reasoning behind that was they wanted to clear the wait list. When Lisa MacLeod, who was minister at the time, made the announcement, it affected me very, very deeply, because I was thinking that an entire generation of children with autism were going to be left behind, and it broke my heart. They wanted to clear those 23,000 children waiting, but by what they did, they functionally cleared the wait list the same way you would clear a table, by just knocking everything off the table and throwing it into the garbage.
So are you saying that kids right now, they're not getting any sort of service or support?
There's actually 50,000 children on the wait list now.
Because it's accumulated.
It's accumulated.
So what's happening with those families and those kids? What does it look like for them now?
It's completely not sustainable. When you have a child with higher needs, the program can run between $80,000 and $100,000 a year. Most families can't afford that. So some families are working 2 jobs. They're cashing in their RSPs, they're selling their homes, they're doing that for their children. And myself, I have no retirement savings left. I don't know what I'm gonna do when I retire, but I'm still in a privileged position because I was able to provide for my son when he was young. Most families can't provide, so they're going without. So there is going to be an entire generation of children that are not going to reach their full potential because this government made this huge policy blunder. And I think what people may not understand is, as parents, we're not asking for math tutoring or some additional academic support. My son, when he was younger, would run into traffic. I needed support. I'm not a therapist. Parents aren't therapists. I needed support from a therapist to help me, to get him to stop running into, to help me stop getting him to run into traffic. That was a life and death situation. They don't learn within the environment the way that other typical kids do. So every basic skill that my son has was taught to him. And some kids are self-injurious. They hurt themselves in different ways. These are behaviors that we need to address because this affects their mental health as well as their physical health.
I want to go back to what you said about clearing the wait list. That was a big catchphrase for the government before they were getting elected. And things, according to you, have gone the opposite way. Do you think that's ever going to materialize? Will that ever happen? The clearing of the wait list as government promised before the election?
No, this government will 100% not clear the wait list. This government promised 8,000 children into the new program by the end of the year. Well, we're approaching the end of the year. Logistically, it's just not possible.
As you came in, you had a sticker on your notebook. It says, Doug Ford lied to autistic children.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about what that means and the effect that's had.
Back in 2018, I followed Ford closely on his campaign trail. And he very clearly said that he was behind the autism community 1,000%. That's one of his phrases. And he has not supported us 1,000%. I'm frankly waiting for just 1% of that support. He promised that children with autism would be fully supported. Our children are in crisis. There is a bottleneck of children that have received 0 services. So no child has moved off the wait list since the fall of 2018. It's been almost 3 years.
No child has moved off the wait list.
Correct, in 3 years. They've waited about 7 years. The average age of diagnosis is 4. So now we're looking at 11-year-olds who have had 0 intervention. If I didn't start intervention for my son around the age of 2, he would be a completely different child. When my son was first diagnosed, I was given a fairly grim prognosis. He was diagnosed with very high needs. I was told that he would likely never speak. I was told that he may never potty train, that he may be in diapers for the rest of his life. And the worst thing I heard, and this makes me tear up a little, I was actually told that he may never recognize me as his mother. So I did a lot of reading. It was a very steep learning curve, and I learned that early intervention was critical. But then I was faced with all these barriers. Just to get him diagnosed was a 1.5-year wait list. Just to get access to services was a couple-year wait list. And he's not that child that I was told to expect. He still has high needs. He still has autism, but because of the early intervention, he is so much more independent. He's able to, do basic life skills, and all of that has led to a much more positive quality of life. He can go to overnight camp, which he loves, because he has those skills. If he didn't learn those skills when he was younger, he wouldn't be able to access all the things that he loves doing. And this is why I keep telling people, the community is in crisis. We've been screaming this for the last few years. This government has been using the pandemic to hide their incompetence and to hide their policy blunders. When the program was destroyed back in 2019, because of that, capacity for autism services was decimated. Therapists who were working with children with autism looked into a different field, and colleges actually stopped offering autism programs. So we lost current professionals and future professionals going into the field. So even if this government could manage administratively, which they can't, to get all these children off the wait list, we simply don't have the capacity in the province to service all these children.
When you talk about support services, what does that mean?
So for children with autism, the gold standard for therapy is ABA, and that stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. And it's the way that our children learn. And that is what got my son to be able to potty train. If it wasn't for ABA, he wouldn't have communication. So ABA is absolutely critical, but the intensity is very high, which is why it can get expensive. And children with autism also need access to things like occupational therapy and speech therapy, and all of those things are very expensive, and most parents aren't able to afford them.
The current minister responsible for this file is Marilee Fullerton. Previously, she was responsible for the long-term care file. During the pandemic, she was widely criticized for her handling of long-term care. Do you trust that she's the right person in place to help families and to move this file along to where it needs to be?
I don't think there is any right person in the current government that could move the file along. All we've seen from this government is words. They're not actually doing anything. It's been 3 years since children have moved off the wait list.
Autism services right now falls under the minister that's responsible for children and social services.
Correct.
As opposed to being, a public health care service. So do you think part of the solution is to treat autism services and fund it the same as we would for, any sort of healthcare need?
Absolutely. Autism is a neurological disorder. It's not a social issue. We should be treating autism services as health services, and each child should get what they need. If I'm going into a hospital due to an injury, I'm not expecting the hospital to give me $200 to pay to fix that injury, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to cover the rest. We're living in Canada. We're expecting universal health care. This province is not providing for our children, and it's very sad.
On the show, we try to pay particular attention to issues facing working women. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about some of the special challenges that this program or lack of a program has had on women in the province.
The way the world is, it tends to be mothers that stay home and become caregivers. I myself had a career, and I was out in the workforce, and I was contributing when my son was younger, but it got to a point where I couldn't continue working because I wasn't getting the support that my son required. So I left my career to become a full-time caregiver for my son. And I know a lot of other mothers had to do that. And this is a very short-sighted perspective that the government takes, because the money that they may be saving on not providing services for children with autism, they're losing in the long run, because women such as myself aren't able to be out there in the workforce.
What are the solutions you need to see from the government?
So the government kept promising us a needs-based program, and the wait list needs to start moving ASAP, like yesterday. The funding caps and the age caps that this government put in, they all need to go. The program needs to be based only on needs. To be completely frank, I don't think that the autism community has a lot of faith in this current government. And I think the results that we're going to see is with the election and with a new government that will actually listen to the community and actually provide for children with autism. Because right now, parents are feeling, like parents of typical children are feeling isolated, and they're struggling because of the online learning. Well, this is everyday life for children with autism. So the isolation and the struggle that parents are feeling right now because of the pandemic, that's what we've been living through for years. You know, the autism community is really a microcosm of what's happening in the broader community right now of parents.
I guess the difference is for those just within the pandemic, there's a light.
Yeah.
And there's hope that there's something else, but with this, there's been no signs of encouragement.
No, the only hope we have is access to services to support our children so that as they age, they can become more independent. And so as caregivers, we don't need to invest as much time and effort. But without access to those services, there really isn't a lot of hope.
What is your message to the government? What do you need them to hear on behalf of parents, families, and kids with autism?
The message that I want this government to hear, and Premier Ford in particular, is that he has caused a tremendous crisis in the community. He has lied to our children. He has lied to our faces. The damage that this government has done is going to take years upon years to recover. After the first year of being Premier, Premier Ford was interviewed, and he was asked what he felt his greatest failure was, and he said the autism file. And now we're approaching the next election, almost 3 years later, and he hasn't done anything to fix it. He considered it a failure, but he didn't fix it. This government decimated a program that was working. This government destroyed the lives of a generation of children with autism. This government really made one of the biggest policy blunders, and as a result of that, children with autism are never going to reach their potential, and they're not going to be able to live their best possible quality of life. And it's extremely short-sighted because these children are going to require a lot more support as they get older.
Angela, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for joining us here today. This has been Uninvited Working Ontario Women News. It's time for a segment that we call I'm Speaking. It's your chance to talk to us about your concerns, whatever you're thinking. You can head to actwow.ca to record your message to us. And now, I'm speaking.
I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
in.
I'm speaking.
Have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
in.
If you don't mind letting me finish,
Wait.
I'm speaking.
Hi, my name is Carla Sleep, and I'm a PSW, and I just started my 19th year, which is totally amazing in this profession right now. When I started 19 years ago, things were so different. We had the time to spend with our residents and with everything else, and now we are just absolutely exhausted every day. And it's not just the exhaustion from work. We're all mothers. We are mothers, we are grandmothers. We work all day. We're up usually by 4:45 in the morning to get ready for work. We come home, now it is 5 o'clock at night. I'm doing laundry, getting dinner ready, and it's exhausting. We all have families that we want to come home and spend time with. And right now, we just don't have the energy in us. For what we are doing and what we are actually getting paid, it is extremely exhausting. But I want to say thank you to all the PSWs, all the healthcare aides, everyone that works in this field right now, because we all know the struggle. We know it's real, and we are all standing together as women, and we are making it work because we will. We will never give up, never. I want to say thank you to you all, and I just want to let you know we are all very grateful for all the work you've done. Thank you, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
I'm Ashley Hill, and I'm from Thunder Bay. And one of the big issues that I see within our province that the government really needs to step up and make sure that everybody in this province has affordable housing. If you are working for minimum wage and you happen to be a single mother and you have to raise 2 children on a single wage. And this happens, and it's not because people make choices that lead them to work minimum wage forever. It's because they've made a choice and then something's happened. So making $15 an hour, you're making $2,000 a month. $1,400 a month rent here in Thunder Bay isn't going to leave you with much. It's going to leave you with $800, and that's for transportation, technology, food, and your other bills, your hydro, your water, your insurance, which is necessity. I don't understand how the province expects women to get anywhere and raise these children any better than being less than. We cannot afford to go any further in this world. In 2021, we need to understand that affordable housing is a government issue. Having affordable housing and more access to safe housing is going to keep our children and is going to keep our province growing strong and healthy. Because when you cut healthy places to live, you end up with more people in your ERs at the end of the day. When you cut from those programs, everything ends up in your healthcare system. Please understand that. We need women to be able to afford good food and good lifestyles for their children. And that all starts with the basic need of housing, Mr. Ford. Housing.